Hey folks, today I stumbled across an article about how some churches are responding to what is known as critical race theory, CRT, and some of the plans that governments have in place to use CRT as an educational tool. I don't know much about critical race theory. The article actually has really inspired me to read about it. But it's basically, I think, a call for us to recognize that there are racial issues in the West, that there is a long, brutal history, a dark history, and how that has impacted Western history, and how that has impacted the reality, the place where we live today. When I was reading the article today, it was written by a pastor from the Southern Baptist Convention. And the Southern Baptist Convention, if you've read the news, you've seen that they've wholeheartedly rejected the possibility of CRT. And this article explains why. One of the things that mentioned in the article is that CRT causes division. It's divisive. As a policy, as a theory, as a philosophy, it causes division. Back in 2015, something called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was concluded here in Canada. And it was in response to the closure of the Indian, they were what they were called the Indian residential schools, which were schools, to use that term incredibly loosely, that were set up where the Canadian government forced children, Indigenous children, to go to these schools. These schools were set up by churches, including the Anglican Church of Canada, basically to indoctrinate these kids, to take away their Indigenous identity. The stories that come out of the residential schools are horrific. Absolutely horrific. At best, horrific. The Truth and Reconciliation report, when it was finalized, when it was launched, when it was made public, it drew some of the very same criticism. Oh, this is just causing hard feelings between groups. This is divisive in its nature. Earlier this week, I did a talk on liberation theology, and one of the critiques that I read about it said exactly the same thing. This is divisive. And this was written by a Roman Catholic cardinal who eventually became Pope, saying this is just divisive. This is creating a divide between people who are seen as oppressed and people who are seen as the oppressors. There's nothing healthy about it. It's not Christian. Critical race theory, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, liberation theology. None of them are divisive. In their nature, they are not divisive. What they do, however, is they ask us, they demand us, sometimes force us painfully to recognize that there is division. Something that is actually divisive actively causes and creates space between people, between organizations, between nations, between people groups, whatever. But it actively, something that is divisive, actively creates space, opens up space between those groups for a particular reason. CRT does not do that. Liberation theology does not do that. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission does not do that. These things open our eyes to the space that is there. Because if they can open our eyes to the space that is there, we can see our part in it. And if we can see our part in it, we can cognitively choose how we will be a part of bridging that divide. How we will be a part of healing those wounds, healing those injuries. How we will be a part of bringing all people back together. Restoring bonds, restoring trust. Fighting for equality, fighting for justice. Yes, these reports all point to people who look just like me and say, people who look just like you did some really messed up things. My eyes need to be open to that. My ears need to hear that. My heart needs to acknowledge that if I am going to be an active force in the healing of those wounds. It is painful to see. But these things aren't causing the divide. They're opening our eyes to the divide that's already there. They're begging us to recognize over and over and over again that there is a divide, that there are oppressed people, that there are oppressors. As a Canadian, as an Anglican priest, as a white male, the Truth and Reconciliation report opened my eyes in such a way that I look forward to how it will challenge me in the future. I look forward to how critical race theory will challenge me in the future. I look forward to how liberation theology will challenge me in the future. We're going to talk about this for the next little while. Not probably every day, but there are certain things that are coming up that I think it's important for us to address. As Christians, as theists, as non-theists, as atheists, as people of other faiths and other cultures, it's important for us to address some of the things that are coming out of CRT, that are coming out of the Truth and Reconciliation report, that are coming out of liberation theology. So we're going to come back to this again. But until then, may the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord's face be made to shine upon you. May the Lord's countenance be lifted up to you. May you always know the peace of being in the Lord's presence. And I pray that as you see division in this world, you won't hide from it. You won't close your eyes to it. You won't clap your ears to it. Acknowledge it so that you can be a part of the solution. Amen.